It's Friday, which means it's time for another Friday Mailbag. Notre Dame has plenty to clean up after Miami, but the Irish still have everything in front of them. Today, we're going to dive into your best questions on how they bounce back and why this season is far from over.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. I've also been covering the Irish since 2020, and I am thrilled to have you here with me on Friday, September 5th. So happy Friday to you, and thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Before we get rolling, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. That way, you never miss an episode. And I also want to give a big thank you to everyone who sent in questions this week for the Friday Mailbag. You guys absolutely brought it this week, and I really do appreciate it. We have got plenty to tackle on today's show, from why Jeremiyah Love only got 10 carries, how much heat Mike Denbrock deserves, to Marcus Freeman's role in game management. Then we're going to shift into what's next for guys like Christian Gray, as well as several guys in the offensive line, and wrap it up with the bigger picture. What's at stake during the bye week, Notre Dame's playoff chances, and what is the atmosphere going to be like when the Aggies come to South Bend? But let's get into it. I got about 10 questions about Jeremiyah Love's 10 carries. We're going to include at Gavin Sheridan 4680, how does your best player get 10 carries? And then Alexander Kuznia 6261, how do you not run the ball more than 10 times to the best running back in the country? The short answer is I have no idea. And we have talked about it at length on this show. At one point, me and my friends who I was watching the game with, we thought that Denbrock was trolling, or maybe Jeremiyah Love did something to piss him off. At the beginning, though, I have to say, I really liked the way that Mike Denbrock called the opening drive. Lots of quick throws to get your quarterback in rhythm, shake the dust off a little bit, and just shake out those nerves. Because when I was watching the other college football games from this past weekend with first-time starting quarterbacks like Julian Saint at Ohio State, he looked a little bit nervous early on. Arch Manning looked more than nervous in his first start at Texas as the guy. Even though he had 2 starts last year, obviously the program is now on his shoulders, and he certainly looked antsy. Really, the only quarterbacks who didn't look antsy were C.J. Carr at Notre Dame, unfortunately Bryce Underwood at Michigan, and the freshman at Cal, who looks like he's going to be a stud. He's probably going to get big-time NIL bag from another school after this season. But I liked what Carr was doing. He got into a rhythm early, and it kept the defense on their toes because everyone in the entire world was expecting Notre Dame to give the ball to Jeremiyah Love in the first drive, and it took him a while before that happened. But here's the thing. Every single time that Notre Dame dropped back to pass, Miami was thrilled. Every time Jeremiyah Love was not given the ball, the Hurricanes defense and their fans were so excited that Notre Dame chose not to give the ball to their best player, and that is a problem. Mike Denbrock called a lot of RPO, run-pass option, which gave Carr the option to pull it and throw the ball horizontally, and the defense started to recognize that, and they actually started showing looks that would encourage Carr to keep the ball and throw it. There's a couple plays where if you go back and look, Love looks pretty pissed off that he didn't get the ball. Look, I get it. Even though he was running into a numbers game that doesn't really make sense if you're staying true to the book of what you're supposed to do when it comes to handing the ball off to the running back or keeping the ball and then making the pass option. Sometimes you just got to give it to number 4 because the numbers, the rules, all of that, they don't apply to the best player in the country more often than not. And also, Notre Dame only ran 58 offensive plays in this game, so they didn't really have a ton to work with, and they were down for the majority of those 58 snaps. So there's some blame to go around. I mean, their defense could not get off the field until late in the third quarter, and Miami dominated offensive possession, or time of possession in this game, I should say. So that made it more difficult for Notre Dame to have opportunities on offense to give the ball to Jeremiyah Love. Most great offenses want to run 65 to maybe even 70 plays a game. Notre Dame came up well short of that. Miami had the ball for 11 more plays than Notre Dame did. So all of these things factor into it, and that's why Jeremiyah Love did not get as many touches as he should. He finished with 14 total touches because he had 4 receptions for 26 yards, and I understand they want to get Jeremiyah Love more involved in the passing game. There's opportunities for him there, especially getting the ball in space. Like they ran that nice play where he motioned out of the backfield, caught an out route. The ball was slightly behind him. If Carr put it, and he let him a little bit more, then maybe he gets a few extra yards after a catch there. But still, 14 total touches is about 11 too few in a game of that magnitude. So I'm hoping that we see some big changes there, which actually leads me to my next question from @Schrunkle. It feels like everyone turned on Mike Denbrock from being one of the top offensive coordinators to being the reason why Notre Dame lost the game. Do you think he'll have it turned around by the time A&M comes to South Bend? What does he do differently against the Aggies? I think you're going to see adjustments, but we're still going to see some RPO and safe passes and dare I say, screenplays to protect Carr and also protect the offensive line. There's going to be a concerted effort to give the ball to Jeremiyah Love and also Jadarian Price early on with the design runs because they just have to, right? After a game like that, when they clearly were not as big of a factor as they should have been, the coaching staff has 2 weeks to basically look at the film and say, hey, how do we figure this out? We have one of the best players in the entire country. How about we just give him the ball on design runs? Even if they stack the box a little bit, Jeremiyah Love has proven, and also Jadarian Price too, they've both proven that they can make big plays. And considering Notre Dame's offense was not very explosive at all against Miami, their best chance at an explosive play is giving it to one of the running backs. Jadarian Price had that 30-yard run in the second quarter, which set up a touchdown. Unfortunately, he fumbled and got benched during the game, but you got to give the ball to those guys because they're both home run hitters in their own individual ways. And I think you're going to see that early on. But the one thing that I am most curious about is how much are they going to try to stretch the field? Because they really didn't do it at all against Miami. They went deep to Malachi Fields on that one play, and then Eli Raridan was wide open behind the defense on a coverage bust. But in order to throw the ball downfield, your offensive line has to block. And Notre Dame's offensive line struggled in pass pro, to say the least. They were actually in the bottom 5 of the entire country in pass blocking grade in week 1. So I want to see Carr push the ball downfield. He has the arm to do it, and he's supposed to have better receivers who can catch the ball and make plays downfield, like a Malachi Fields, who we saw do it in game 1, and like Jaden Greathouse, who didn't have a single reception against Miami. You've got to try to force the ball downfield a little bit, let Carr let it rip, and force the defense to play that, because if they continue to run this horizontal passing game, their corners are just going to creep up, and they're going to read that every single time, and then the safeties and everyone can crowd the box, and it makes it more difficult to run. So if it's a clean weather day and Texas A&M starts crowding the box, I really hope that Notre Dame tries to push the ball downfield a little bit, but if they don't, and Notre Dame continues to just run horizontal passes and quick game and not really try to take a chance, it just makes life harder on CJ Carr, which is ironic because you're trying to make life easier with this horizontal stuff, and I just think Texas A&M is too good. They're going to shut down the screen game. They're going to blitz an offensive line that's already struggling. So I'm expecting to see pretty big changes from the offense in this game. A lot more designed runs. They're going to force the ball to Jeremiyah Love early and often, and then they're going to take shots when they can get them. Okay, next up, at Be Less Wrong 422, with all the questionable play calling on offense and defense during the Miami game, what is Marcus Freeman's role in the play calling? I understand the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators make calls in the every down plays, but doesn't Marcus have final say? Marcus has say in the play calling, obviously, but he's going to let his coordinators do their job, especially Mike Denbrock, considering Marcus Freeman is a defensive coach. Freeman isn't going to come up to Denbrock and say, hey, we need to run this exact play in this moment of time. He'll probably say something along the lines of, hey, let's take a shot here, or let's be aggressive on this possession. Or if it's a situation where Notre Dame has the ball going into half, he'll say, hey, let's try to score a touchdown here, or maybe let's just try to run out the clock. Or, depending on how the defense is going up in a situation where they have to get a stop here, Marcus Freeman is obviously going to have some input, but I think his decisions have to do with the bigger scope of the game, the bigger picture than individual plays. Marcus Freeman was a coordinator himself, defensive coordinator at Cincinnati, and then defensive coordinator at Notre Dame for 1 year before he became the head coach. He understands that he needs to empower his staff, especially the coordinators. And if he starts micromanaging mid-game, that's not good for anyone. He has a lot more input in the game planning during the week because that is a collective process among the entire coaching staff. But when it's in the middle of the game, you got to let your coordinators operate there. And if you have to step in, you can, but I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where we're watching a game and Marcus Freeman all of a sudden takes over offensive play calling or defensive play calling. That's just not going to happen. That's not good for anyone. Marcus Freeman doesn't want to do that. There's nobody on the staff who wants that. So he'll have input for sure, but his input is always going to be revolved around the bigger decisions that have more to do than just one play. All right, coming up, we're going to dive into how Notre Dame's secondary and offensive line can improve and what it means when even the captains aren't playing up to the Notre Dame standard. Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Notre Dame, CJ Carr delivered in a big way during the fourth quarter. We all remember his no-look touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert for his first career touchdown pass, but how about the way he stayed cool, calm, and collected when the Irish went down 14 points? When the pressure was on, Carr came through. No hesitation, no delay. And just like CJ Carr delivered for Notre Dame, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday and keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick Awards than anyone else. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. You can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, our next question comes from @ChaseKeller5425. How do you think the locker room will react to the captains performing mostly poor against Miami? How can the captains hold the team accountable when they themselves performed poorly? This is a great question from Chase, but I honestly think the captains are going to be fine because it's not like anyone else stepped up in a big way either. It's not like everyone else in the team played a great game and the captains were the one who was holding the rest of them back. It was just a bad game for the vast majority of this team, so they all have to figure it out. I would say for the captains, though, they have an added responsibility to look themselves in the mirror, take accountability for how they played against Miami, and then they have to step up their game even more to set the tone for everyone else in the roster, because what they put out there was unacceptable. Like, I can't even imagine being Emil Wagner or Donovan Heinisch in their respective film rooms. Heinisch was unplayable during the second half of that game. And for the record, I love Donovan Heinisch. I love his effort. I love his intensity. Every single team in the country would love to have a Donovan Heinisch. But we can't escape the fact that he was getting mauled during this game against Miami. Hopefully he doesn't have to go up against an offensive line like that the rest of the country, or the rest of the season, I should say, because they do have one of the best offensive lines in the country. But it's unacceptable from any player, a starter, let alone a captain. And Emil Wagner, I feel bad for him because he's been getting crushed on Twitter, and Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated suggested that he was probably dealing with some sort of injury, or maybe it was a cramp. I hope it was a cramp because it was unacceptable what was happening to him late in the game. Akeem Messidor and Ruben Bain were just treating him like he was a JV high schooler on the edge, and they just blew by him every single time, especially late in the game. I'm guessing that he was dealing with cramps, considering how badly Anthony Knapp was cramping up during that game, couldn't even come in the last drive. And I understand that these guys do a lot of conditioning in the summer. They practice outside the heat in South Bend. That South Florida heat and humidity is different. I do believe that it played a factor in this game. I wasn't so sure at first, but as Tim O'Malley pointed out, I know it had a factor because you just looked at the Notre Dame team and they were dead during the second half of this game, especially on the offensive line. It might seem like I'm picking on Emil Wagner and Donovan Heinisch, but it wasn't just them. Drake Bowen didn't have a great game. He missed some tackles that he never misses. Adon Schuler had the bad play where he could have made a play on the ball, decided to wait for it to come to him. Instead, CJ Daniels said, nope, I'll take that. Touchdown. See me on SC top 10 every single weekend. Like, I'm so sick of seeing that CJ Daniels touchdown, but credit to him, man. He made an unbelievable play there, and that's a big reason why they ended up winning that game. So, Adon Schuler didn't play great. Billy Shrout was just fine. Will Pauling was a non-factor because he was barely in the game and they never threw it his way. So all of the captains have to come together here, and they've got to figure out how to lead, because leadership was a big question about this group throughout the offseason. And they're not a very veteran group. I mean, Drake Bowen is a redshirt sophomore. Billy Shrout is a senior. Emil Wagner is a senior. Will Pauling is a transfer, so he's brand new. Donovan Heinisch is a little bit older, but they haven't been playing a whole lot of football, whereas like last year, Xavier Watts, fifth-year senior, Jack Kaiser, sixth-year senior, Riley Mills, fifth-year senior, guys who were old and also had played a lot of college football. So now these guys are going to have to step up here, take accountability for their actions, and elevate their play so that everyone else follows them. Because it's easy to lead in camp. When you're 0-0 and you're just trying to get through a rough practice, it's a lot harder to lead when you're 0-1 on the season and you have a gigantic game coming up against Texas A&M. But I have faith that these guys are going to be able to do it. Next up, Drew Brennan, 77. With Leonard Moore being so good, teams just automatically go away from him, which leads to a lot more passes being thrown at Christian Gray. Is Gray's up and down play a product of him seeing more passes and we just notice every completion on his side of the field just that much more? Sometimes I feel for him because teams do whatever they can to not throw toward Moore. Okay, so it's a combination of a couple of things. Part of it does have to do with the fact that teams throw away from Leonard Moore and they got to throw it to a wide receiver, so they go to Christian Gray's side. But Christian Gray is particularly vulnerable against the deep ball. So as long as he keeps getting beaten on deep balls, they're going to keep throwing his way. On Miami's last drive that set up the game-winning field goal, they got a huge chunk play because of a Christian Gray PI penalty. And honestly, they could have called one on him earlier in the game as well. Last year, he was the most targeted of any Notre Dame defensive back. He was targeted 68 times in the season. He allowed completions 59% of the time for 583 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he also had 6 penalties registered against him. But he also had 3 interceptions, including the biggest one of the entire season. Actually, the top 2 biggest ones of the entire season. First against USC, and then he followed that up against Penn State. And he also had 7 pass breakups, including some of the biggest pass breakups on the year. So it can feel like feast or famine with Christian Gray. I think that's because it is. But that's also how it is with most cornerbacks in college football. There are very few shutdown corners. And we at Notre Dame have been spoiled a little bit because Benjamin Morrison was a shutdown corner until he got hurt, obviously. Leonard Moore is pretty much a shutdown corner, but even he got beat by the double move that C.J. Daniels ran en route to his touchdown. So it's really pretty normal for college cornerbacks to get beat. That's why they're in college. They're not all going to be first or second round draft picks, but when teams want to take a shot downfield, they're going to go Christian Gray's way until he gives them a reason not to. I'm still hopeful that Christian Gray can develop into a really good corner. We've seen flashes. We know he has the traits. He's got the size, the length, the athletic ability, all that. And he does make some great plays. Like, he had a great pass breakup during the game. There's a couple times where he was awesome in man coverage. So we know he's got it in him, but the defense has to throw to someone, and they're just not going to throw Leonard Moore's way a ton. So if Christian Gray can really step up his game even more and he becomes a shutdown corner on his side, then that's going to cause a lot of problems for opposing offenses. But also, we're going to see how much Chris Ash allows them to run man coverage. They ran man quite a bit in this game, maybe not as much as they would have under Al Golden, but they gave up a lot of easy throws because they were playing off the ball, trying to prevent a big play. So I think sometimes in those instances, Gray looked bad, but it wasn't really his fault because he was positioned 10 yards off the ball. So I think he's going to get better in time. I think the defense is going to be more aggressive as a whole, and that's going to allow Christian Gray and these other DBs to make some big plays. Okay, what do we got next here? Oh, we got a question from Dan Brockman, who says something in the very back of my mind that probably isn't true, but do you think the offensive line had more issues last year than we were aware of, but with Riley Leonard's legs and ability to escape, he masked them? It is absolutely true, Dan Brockman, especially early on in the season. I actually rewatched the Notre Dame Texas A&M game from last year, this past summer, one night, didn't have much going on, and I was actually reminded just how much Riley Leonard's legs factored into that game, and not just in the designed runs that they ran a lot in the second half. Like, we all knew going into that game how good Texas A&M's defensive line was. They had 3 eventual NFL draft picks. Notre Dame was starting an offensive line that I think had 5 combined starts at the time. Honestly, when you say it out loud and you think back, it's like, how did they win that game, especially on the road? Well, a big reason why is because Riley Leonard was able to avoid a lot of sacks. He was particularly elusive in that game, and he was able to avoid some real negative plays and either get the ball, throw it away, or gain a few yards and avoid a big sack. But that was absolutely a big deal. And then against Northern Illinois, when he couldn't run, he was kind of standing back there, and he was really just not in a good place. It's a big reason why Notre Dame lost that game, because he couldn't move around. They couldn't run him like they used to, or they eventually would later on in the season. But it took some time for that offensive line to really become a strength. Like, we all remember the end of the year when they were setting the tone, and they were running all over teams and things like that. But that was not the case early on, which could be a good thing as we look to this offensive line, who obviously struggled mightily in the first game. But they're going to get better as the year goes on. And once they get Charles Jagasaw back, which we hope will be some point in October, I think they're going to take an even bigger step in the right direction. I don't expect Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp to play like they did in week one ever again, hopefully, because it was their worst games of their college careers, and they happen to have them at the exact same time. And also, CJ Carr is a little bit more mobile than I probably gave him credit for. I knew he could move around, but he showed some real elusiveness. It wasn't like Ian Book level spin move and his ability to just somehow weasel out of some very dangerous situations in the backfield. Now, some would say he would resort to that a little bit too quickly sometimes, but when CJ Carr made that unbelievable play where he's running around backwards 20 yards and then throws that touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert, that was a great play. But I think there was another play early on in the game which didn't amount to anything. It was a third down. He ended up throwing the ball away, but Ruben Bain was coming flying in to his blind side. Carr just made a real subtle move to avoid him, evade the pressure, runs left, and then he throws the ball away, which is exactly what he should do in that situation. But I was like, okay, we didn't really know how good he was at evading pressure until he was put in a live game situation, because in the spring game, he's wearing a red jersey. They're not actually going to hit him. But I was really impressed with what I saw from him in that regard. And even though Texas A&M has a good defense, I don't think they have a defensive line quite as good as Miami's. So I think the offensive line is going to take a big step forward. I think CJ Carr is going to help him out as well with his ability to avoid sacks. It's just not going to be the same as Riley Leonard, right? Because Riley Leonard was 6'4", 230. He was as big as the linebackers and the DNs trying to hit him, and he's a better athlete than CJ Carr. But I do expect to see significant progress in that regard going forward. All right, we've got a few more questions left, so stick around to hear how much the Texas A&M game impacts Notre Dame's playoff chances and what the atmosphere is going to be like when the Aggies come to South Bend. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Hey, Irish fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. All right, here's my pick for tonight. NFL kicked off last night, Thursday night. Eagles ended up beating the Cowboys after a long rain delay, but we got another game tonight. The Chiefs playing the Chargers. I think earlier this week I said it's a road game for the Chiefs. Well, it's a road game for both teams because this game is being played in Brazil, and the Chiefs are favored by 3. I already gave out Patrick Mahomes as my MVP pick, and I picked the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, so guess what? I'm taking the Chiefs, -3 in this game tonight in Brazil. So glad that football is back. And if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Pete McKeon would like to know, what would be better for Notre Dame's playoff chances? Losing to Texas A&M and then winning out, or beating Texas A&M and then losing one remaining game on the schedule to a weaker opponent? Maybe this is just me, but I think this is an easy answer. It's beating Texas A&M for sure. Notre Dame needs a signature win. They almost had one on the road against Miami, but it didn't happen. And I think beating a ranked SEC team at home is probably their best opportunity left. unless maybe USC is a lot better than everyone expects. But Boise State looked like it could be a ranked matchup. Not anymore after they got ran off the field by USF. So the schedule eases up significantly after this game against Texas A&M. So they got to win this one. And also, if you lose to Texas A&M, you start off 0-2, you're going to be completely out of the mix until late November at best, because no one is going to think about you. No one has 2 losses at this point in the season. No, not any real legit college football playoff contenders. So they would have 2 losses. They'd be completely out of the limelight in the national college football media for the next 2 months. They wouldn't really have any big game until USC on October 18th. And I think people would just kind of forget about Notre Dame. And it might sound ridiculous, but like that stuff matters. You have to be in the mix. You have to be in the conversation week to week, because that's when people are paying attention to you. And nobody's going to be paying attention to Notre Dame if they start off 0-2 and then they beat up on like Purdue and then Arkansas and teams like that. It's just not going to make a difference. So they have to beat Texas A&M. And if they're, let's say, 8-1 in November and end up dropping a game to, let's say, Pitt on the road, like that is a lot more forgivable, because by that point, they've already established themselves as one of the better teams in the country. And you just look at what happened last year. Ohio State lost their last game of the regular season at home to their rival, who was terrible last season in Michigan, and they still hosted a playoff game. Tennessee lost a game in October and November. The loss in November was very forgivable. They lost to Georgia, but their loss in October was on the road at Arkansas, and Arkansas was one of the worst teams in the SEC last year. They still got in the playoff because they had some big wins, like over Alabama. Like they had signature moments in the middle of the year, so everyone was talking about Tennessee, and perception matters. They're going to need to be in the spotlight in the middle of the season, and I just think if they start off 0-2, they're not going to be in the spotlight at all until they win their 10th straight. If that were to happen, to be like, oh my God, Notre Dame just finished 10-2. But by that point, they're going to be, arguing against teams who've been in the mix. It doesn't really seem like a good recipe. I think the committee cares more about big wins than bad losses. I think they've proven that over time. Notre Dame really needs a big win, and Texas A&M might be their last chance to get a big win this season. All right, now Connor Cross 17 asks, do you think this bye week will help the Irish regroup, or would you rather play Texas A&M this week? I definitely don't want them to play Texas A&M this week. That would be way too much to ask, to go play Miami on the road, a top 10 team, in a very physical game on a Sunday, and then turn around and play Texas A&M 6 days later. They would get killed in that game more than likely, because that was a very physical, taxing game. Anthony Knapp left with cramps. We were just talking about Emil Wagner probably dealing with something too. Like, that would not be good for anyone. But instead of a bye, I wish they were playing like Tennessee Tech, Little Sisters of the Poor, St. Mary's School for the Blind, and just absolutely pulverize them to get the stench of the Miami game off. I'm hopeful that the team is going to be able to use this bye week to reset, fix a lot of the mistakes they made in week 1. On offense, I would say the problems seem pretty fixable, right? Give the ball to Jeremiyah Love more, take a few more shots downfield, and I'm confident the offensive line is not going to struggle as much against A&M as they did against Miami, because I don't think Texas A&M has 2 NFL guys on the edge. They're already in the NFL. They were on the team last year. I am a little bit more concerned about the defense, because they just looked way too passive throughout this game, and they did shut down the run game against Miami in the second half, but Miami was being ultra conservative, and Texas A&M has Marcel Reed, who can run the ball. He also threw the ball better against UTSA. They've got some really good running backs with Reuben Owens and Moss as well, so they're going to try to test this Notre Dame defense. We also didn't really see Notre Dame go up against many dual-threat quarterbacks last season, so that's going to be interesting to follow. Like, they're going to have to be very disciplined, because Marcel Reed is such a good athlete. You make one mistake on defense and he could be gone. But I really do think Notre Dame could have benefited from a tune-up game in between Miami and Texas A&M, if nothing else, just to build some confidence for this team, because I think they need it a little bit after being humbled against Miami, but they don't have that luxury. And honestly, they probably won't have that luxury anytime in the future, because in order for Notre Dame to schedule these big games as an independent, it's probably going to have to be in weeks 1 through 3 every single year, especially now that the SEC has a 9-game conference requirement. Big Ten already has that. So those teams play those non-conference games very early on in the year. That's when Notre Dame is going to have to play them. So, this is probably just a new reality. I would hope that some of these tough season openers are at least home instead of all of them being on the road. But yeah, Notre Dame is going to start their seasons with a real tough game. And when they win, it's great, like last year against Texas A&M. And if they lose, they put themselves behind the 8 ball very early on in the season. All right, our last one. Shout out Catherine Myers, who comes in with, I'm going to the Texas A&M game. What do you think the atmosphere will be like? Well, I'm going to be there, and I think it's going to be electric. This is not a regular opponent that Notre Dame sees very often. Texas A&M has come to town before, but I do expect a lot of Aggies fans are going to make the trip, so just be ready for that. And I think the fans understand the desperation of the moment. Not to use that word flippantly, but it's kind of true. It's a must-win game for Notre Dame, even though I do think there is somewhat of a possibility of them making the playoff if they lose. Everything I was talking earlier, like they would be out of the spotlight, out of the mix. All the optimism, enthusiasm, the momentum from the national championship run and everything they had going from in the offseason would be washed away in the span of 10 days, basically, or 2 weeks, I should say. And for as much as we complain about the atmosphere in Notre Dame Stadium sometimes, like we get up for the biggest moments. The Indiana home playoff game was insane because it was a huge moment. First ever home playoff game. Game day's there. Everyone's there. It's at night. The weather was so cold. You got Kurt Signetti talking all his trash, but that crowd was unbelievable. The most fun I've ever had in Notre Dame Stadium, which I didn't think anything would ever beat USC in 2017, my senior year. Also got to mention Ohio State in 2023. Electric atmosphere until it wasn't. But the thing is, though, Notre Dame needs to start out fast. If Texas A&M jumps out to a 2-score lead or like a 10-point lead or anything like that, it is going to be a very tense crowd because everyone is going to understand the magnitude of the moment, the desperation, all that stuff. And I think it's going to get real tight and it won't be a whole lot of fun. But if Notre Dame comes out, they get an early score, they get an early turnover, they get some momentum on their side, the crowd is going to be up for it and they're going to help carry this team to a win because it's not about style points at all in this game. It's just about survival. Just win the game. And I think the crowd is going to come ready to help the team do just that. All right, that's going to do it for me today, and that is a wrap for this week on Locked On Irish. Thank you so much for making this your first watch or listen of the day and for tuning in all week long. If you have not already, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget, like, rate, and review. Really do appreciate the support. If you're a second listen, check out Locked On's new weekly preview show, College Football Kickoff, only available on Fire TV. I'm going to be back on Monday, and we will officially turn the page to the home opener against Texas A&M. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you soon.